All right, howdy. So in this video, we're going to use some of the HTML5 containers that you probably have heard of or we've talked about, and make a basic one-column sort of outline for a page that you could reuse for other things. So what I'm going to do is start with a template file. I've got this folder here called basic page site, and it's got a template file inside of it. So what I'm going to do is go to my desktop and drag that folder to the sidebar in brackets here. So brackets is the app I'm using in this video. So remember that when you're using brackets, often it works better to, for live preview anyway, to open a folder. So I just drag that folder directly into the sidebar here in brackets, and I'm good. And then inside of there, I've already made a template page, which you probably have already, but if you don't, you should, because it saves you a lot of time, right? So it's kind of like a cookie show. I'm going to start halfway done already. So it's basically got your HTML tag up at the top, or your doc type, your HTML tag. Since I'm doing this in English, I'm going to put language equals EN, but that could change depending on what language you're in. But the rest is just standard stuff. Head, meta tag for the character set, the title, and the body, and there's nothing else in there. So if you don't have this page, go ahead and make it. I will wait. Well, I'm not really going to wait. You can always pause the video, right? So, okay, so we've got that, starter page there. I'm going to go ahead and do a save as. I'm going to go to File and Save As. And I'm going to save this as page 1 because I always do that because I have no imagination again. And save it in that same folder. That way my template file is not changed and I'm starting a new file, right? So, okay, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go down into the body and make a container that's going to hold everything. A lot of people call this a wrapper. I'm going to use the div tag. So a div, again, is a generic container, and a lot of people use it at this point for sort of a wrapper for the whole page. So there's my div tag. I'm going to add an ID. I'm going to say ID equals, and I'll call it wrapper. I could call it whatever I want. And that's a wrapper like a gum wrapper, not like a hip hop wrapper or anything like that. Different kind of wrapper, right? So I've got div ID equals wrapper. So again, an ID means that this is an identified kind of object on the page, and the name of it is wrapper. So I can pretty much use whatever I want for that ID name, but I can only use it once. So there's the container for my whole page, but we're not going to be able to see it, right, unless I do a little bit of styles. So I'm going to start some styles as well. I'm going to go up here after the title tag and add my style tag. And again, since I'm in brackets, as soon as I start typing ST, I get two options. It's going to try to predict what I want to type. So I can see style there, so I could use my arrow key or click on it and then just hit return, and it finishes it for me. So it's auto-completing. And then I'm going to say type. So as soon as I type TY, I get to type, and I can hit return. And it already did that for me too. And then what kind of type is it? It's text CSS. It's already highlighted, so I just hit return again, and I'm done. I only had to type like 5 characters or something like that. And then as soon as I type the closing bracket, this one, it typed this for me. So, or didn't type, it just input it. There's no little person in there typing. I hope. It's creepy. Okay, so there's my style tag, which you probably have seen already, but just to kind of go over that again. And then I'm going to add my styles for the wrapper. So since it's an ID, it starts with a pound sign or hash, and then wrapper with a W, and then a curly brace, and then I'm going to make sure I put my closing curly brace to make sure I finish that that CSS style. And all I'm going to do is add a few styles so that we can see what's going on. I'm going to add background dash color. There's background color, and I'll just make it a gray. And I'm going to, well, actually, let's stop there for a second. So let's look at what we've done so far. How do I look at that, right? So I can either just save this file and open it. So I'll go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to File, Save, and it's saved, right? And then how do I open it in my browser? I can either drag it in, I could go to File Open, but I'm going to drag it in because I'm, well, actually go to File Open. I've got too many files on my desktop. I'm going to go to File Open and go to that folder on my desktop, basic page site. There it is, and there is page 1, right? And I'm going to click Open, and there it is. Super exciting. I don't really see much yet, so we're going to go ahead and continue on and start adding some things into that wrapper so that we can see what's going on. So I'm going to go down here inside the wrapper itself, and I'm going to add a header. So I'm going to start typing right there and add a header. And a header is, again, an HTML5 container that means something at the head of a section or an article or something like that. Usually it's at the top. I don't know if it's ever not at the top, but we'll just say it's usually at the top. So I'm going to type, this is the header. Put identifying information, whoops, 2 M's, Asian here. So this is the header, put identifying information here. So I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then go over here and click refresh, and I will see that page. So you're probably remembering, maybe if you've seen this before, you could have done this with live preview in brackets, right? So that is one way to do it, and if you're using a different editor, old school style, I guess you might call it, you're gonna do your code on the left or do your code in your code editor. It doesn't have to be on the left, but mine is. And then save it and then go over to your browser and refresh. But instead, what we can do is we can use live preview, so in brackets anyway. So I'm going to go up here to the top to the little lightning bolt thing up here at the top and click on that, and I get a live preview if it works. Yeah, there we go. So now I don't have to save and refresh, and it'll save me a little bit of time. Now we can see what I was looking for. That background color for the wrapper, you can see it's behind there. There was nothing in the wrapper, so it wasn't actually showing up at all there at first. So, okay, so that's good. So there's our header. And then below that, we're going to put our nav. So I'm going to go below my div here, actually after the header, and I'm going to add some line breaks just so I can move this code up so you guys can see it a little better. So we're still inside of the div. Here's the closing part of the wrapper. Everything on the page I'm going to put between this opening and closing div tag. Yeah, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to add a navigation bar. So I'm going to use the nav tag, and the nav tag is another HTML5 container for navigation. Makes sense, huh? They kind of chose some good names for these things. So I'm going to go in there and put a nav, and then I will put while I'm in there, I'm going to put a couple of links. So I'm going to do A for a link, obviously, and then close it so that I get a closing link tag. And I'm going to, since I'm here, to make this actually a function as a link, I'm going to add the href attribute, hypertext reference, and I'm just going to put a dummy link in there. You can just use a hash for that, and that is often a good way to sort of make a link behave like a link, but it doesn't go anywhere yet. So obviously you'd have to replace that guy with a actual link. Let me make this slightly larger for you guys too, in case you're having trouble seeing. That may be too big. Okay, so yeah, so remember to add that so that it'll act like a link and look like a link. And then I will just copy that. Oh, let's put in an actual something to link to here. Let's put page 1. We'll pretend that that's a link to page 1. I'm going to copy that whole thing and paste it down below there. And this will be a link to page 2. So these links aren't really going anywhere yet, right? Because these are just placeholder links, but just to give us something to look at. Okay, so, and remember that when you're copying and pasting, I just did some copy paste, right? The good thing about copy paste is it's going to save you some time. The bad thing is if I made a mistake on this link, it's going to be the same mistake on that link. So be careful about the copy paste catch-22 situation there. Okay, so now I've got my navigation bar. I kind of want to see a little bit about where these different containers are. If I look over here on my page, I can't really see the end of the header and the beginning of the nav and that kind of thing. So often what I will do is I will add some styles at the top or for the container so that I can see what's going on while I'm working. So I'm going to go up here to the top and add a few styles for some of the containers we're going to use. So I'm going to type header here, comma, and I'm just going to cover all the bases as far as the main containers I'm going to use. So I'm using header, nav, article, and footer. There are more, which you probably know already, but if you don't, there's more containers you could use, but that's what I'm using in this example. So what does this selector mean again? If you haven't seen this, you probably have, but if you haven't, the comma just means I want to apply the same styles to all 4 of these elements. So this will apply the same styles to any header, any nav element, any article, and any footer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little outline on it. So outline, I'm just going to say 1 pixel solid and red. That's going to put a red outline around any of these elements, and you can see it's already appearing here in my live view. Make this a little bigger too so you can see it. So now I've got a red outline there. Outline is better than a border in this case because it doesn't take up any space. So if I made it bigger, it wouldn't change anything. I could go nutty and do that. That looks dumb, right? But you can see it doesn't change the size of anything. A border will. So, and again, I just use this so I can visualize what's going on. The other thing I'm going to do since I'm here is I'm going to add a little bit of padding to each of these elements. Let's say 1 EM. And what that does is push in the content a little bit so it's not right up against the edge. When you have visible colors or borders or anything like that, you don't want text to be right up against the edge of it. So by adding a little bit of padding, padding is the space between the content and the inside of the container. Sound just like it sounds, right? It's padding. Like think about a UPS, right? You've got a little bit of a bubble wrap in there. That's what padding is. So that makes some space in there so I can get a little breathing room and the text is not cramped there. So that's all I'm going to do for now on that. And that was just so I could see what's going on my page and see these containers. So now I can see my header up here and I can see my navigation bar. Let's do one more thing since we're up here. I want a little bit of space between these links so that doesn't look like just 2 words, even though, you know, what kind of sentence would that? Page 1, page 2. That's a weird sentence. But I want a little bit of space between those links. Remember that we just used 2 plain old links here in our nav bar. Normally they're going to be, or very often anyway, they're going to be list items in a list, but we may not have gotten to that yet depending on when you're seeing this video. So for now, this is probably fine. It's just a couple of links next to each other. But I want to put a little bit more space between them. So I'm going to go up here to my styles one more time and style my links. So I use my A as my selector for my style. That means I'm going to modify the anchor tag, which is the link, right? That's this guy right here and that one. So all I'm going to do here is put, let's say margin dash right, and let's put 1 EM. And that added that little space right here. So now they're separate and it's clear that those are 2 different things to click on rather than 1 because they were pretty close together, right? That's all I was gonna do there. Not too big of a deal, right? Okay, so I think now we're good to continue on with our page. We're actually don't have too much to go. So we have our nav, then below that, we're going to put our actual article, right? What are you gonna talk about? So I'm gonna go to article here, and there's my article. And then in my article, I might have a heading, right, for my article, whatever it's about. So I'm going to go heading level 1. And let's say, let's just put in the heading level 1, this is the main heading. That's not a good heading, but you get the idea, right? So there's my heading level 1. And then below that, that's kind of identifying what this article is about. Below that, I'm going to put my actual content. So let's start with a paragraph for that. And inside of that paragraph, I'm going to put, this is the content. What's my article about? Oh, you don't have to be a nerd to code, but it helps. Yeah, okay. Not a good joke, but anyway, there's my content. It's just kind of placeholder text. You could put some text in there or whatever you want when you're making sort of a template page, but I put something else in there. Okay, so that's the end of our article. Wow, that's a really interesting article. So here's article. That's the whole container for our article. Here's our heading, right? There it is. And that's the other cool thing about this version anyway of brackets is when I click on things, it highlights it over here for me. And there's my paragraph. And of course, I would make a better article than that if I could. All right, the last element on our page is going to be the footer. So I'm going to go below my article here and add a footer. And in the footer, you're commonly going to have copyright information, that kind of thing. So I'm going to put the special character for copyright, which is ampersand copy and then a semicolon, not a colon. And then I'm going to put space and then 2055 by Mark Garrett. And yes, I am coming to you from the future. Actually, I won't even be around in 2055. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll be part Android or something. Anyway, yeah, so you put your copyright information down there in the footer, and you can see it showing up right there. And I think that's good. So I'm going to get rid of all this because we don't need this anymore. So that is the page so far. Let's take a look at it. Looks okay. Not exciting, but it's a good starting point. So right now it is kind of the full width pretty much of the browser. And at that point, that means you can get some pretty awkward kind of, let me zoom back to 0 here. There it is, a minimum kind of width for the browser. And then, but if I go wide, especially if I have a wide monitor, it gets a little bit weird, right? Especially depending on how much content you have. So you might not want a web page that's 40 miles long if somebody has a giant monitor or something. So we're going to add 2 extra little pieces of code, or a couple little extra pieces of code to sort of limit the width of that and to center it in case somebody has a large monitor. So that's where the wrapper comes in handy again. Remember, our wrapper goes all the way from the beginning to the end. That's the gray background that we see there. So I'm going to go back up to my styles and add, let's add a max width. So I'm going to go to max dash width, and I'm going to say 1170. The reason I'm using 1170, it's one of the breakpoints inside of Bootstrap. It's kind of a common size, and it's the size of width, basically the width of a 720p monitor, minus a little bit of extra spacing and margin. So that means if somebody's on a 720p monitor, that's about as big as it'll get. If somebody's on a bigger monitor, let me go ahead and see what happens. So I'm going to go over here again and resize my browser. Aha, you see it stops. So now it stops. I'm on 1020p right now on this video. 1020? Yeah, 1080p on this video. And you can see that stops. So it doesn't get ridiculously wide. But now it looks a little weird, right? If I do have a large monitor, it's over here on the left. So we're going to add one more thing here, one or two. And this time we're going to say, okay, if it does get that wide, let's center it. So I'm going to go below there and say margin 0 space auto. And if you haven't seen this piece of code before, it's pretty useful. What it says is I want 0 margin on the top of my wrapper. Margin is the space outside the wrapper. So this is the top and this is the bottom. So I don't care about the top, I just set it to 0. But auto, what auto ends up doing on the left and right, so the first number is the top and bottom. The second number or keyword is left and right. So when you use auto as the keyword for left and right, it basically calculates the same value for both sides. What does that mean? That means if I get to that 1170, now it's going to calculate an automatic margin on the left and an automatic margin on the right that are the same, and now it's centered. So it doesn't feel so weird if you're on a big monitor. Like that. Looks a little, it's the same width, but it doesn't feel so strange kind of off on the left there. Okay, so I think that is it for that. You could add a minimum width too, but for this page, the browser doesn't really get past that. You may see minimum widths used sometimes to make it so that you don't get too short of a line length. If you wanted to add that, you would just add min-width to the CSS, just like max width, but it's min width. And that would stop at a certain point. It wouldn't get any more narrow than that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then I'm going to check it. So you always want to check your page to make sure it's okay. with as far as what code you did, and you can do that in the validators, which you've probably seen. So here's the HTML validator, and I'm going to take that page. Here it is, the basic page site. Here's page 1. I'm going to go to File, Upload, drag that in, click Check, and green. Oh, I didn't make any mistakes on that as far as it knows. Then I'm going to check the CSS too. I did use CSS on this page, so I'm going to go to my CSS validator. I already had those open, right? Because I wanted to save a little time, but you can find them. And I go to, I'm going to click by File, Upload right here, and I'm going to do the same thing. Drag it right here. Check my CSS. Ah, it's okay. It's green. Green is good. I don't know why green is good. It means go, I guess. So there you go. We have valid page. We have a nice little page with, oh, that's not it anymore. Where'd it go? There it is. We have a nice little page that we could use. And a common layout doesn't have any columns, but we will get to that eventually. One other thing to think about, if you are going to use these HTML5 containers, they are not super new, but they do not always work correctly in older versions of IE. So you might want to add a little bit of code. This is a page from W3 Schools talking about HTML5 browser support. A couple things you might want to add to your page. This is a little line of CSS. If I blow that up so you can see it here. Ooh, that's too big. So I'm just going to copy this and go to back to my page and paste that in. Make sure I get it in the right spot here. So this says headers, section, footers, asides, navs, main, containers, article, and figures are all going to display as blocks. So that will help tell older browsers that I want those to be block elements if they don't understand it. So that usually is older versions of IE. Other thing you might want to add is, I think it's down here. This is called the HTML5 shiv. It is a code that you can add to a page, and it tries to add support for those HTML5 elements in older versions of mostly IE, and maybe all IE. Yeah, I think it is IE. So this is a conditional statement, which maybe you've seen before. You just copy and paste that into the head, this part here, of your document, and then download that file, it's a JavaScript file, JS, or you could link to it. If this link is still good, you'd have to check that. And it will add HTML5 container support to your page, even in older versions of IE. And I almost didn't say that or even talk about that because it's really only IE, I think 8 and below. And at the point of this video, that is less than 2% of use worldwide, I think, and going down. So if you want to add that, that would be good and make your page a little more adaptable, useful for everybody, but probably will go away eventually. But you could always add this, and it's not going to hurt anything. And that would add to the support. And I would check that page again if I was smart, but I'm running out of time. So I think that is it for this little video, and I will talk to you again next time.